Have you ever wondered why some people rise from nothing, defying odds, defying logic, while others, with everything in their favor, somehow fade away? Why is it that when life knocks one person down, they stay broken, but another comes back fiercer, sharper, unstoppable? Nietzsche believed he knew the answer, and it wasn't luck, talent, or intelligence. It was something far more primal. Something buried so deep inside the human spirit that most people spend their lives unaware it even exists. He called it the will to power. But here's the dark truth. It's not just a philosophical idea. It's a psychological engine that shapes every choice you make, every belief you hold, every success and failure you experience, whether you realize it or not. And the more you deny it, the more it controls you. The moment you open your eyes in the morning, the moment your mind begins to whisper what you should do, who you should be, what you can't achieve, that's not random thought. That's your will to power talking. It's the ancient instinct that pushes every living thing to grow, dominate, express, and become more. It's not about violence or arrogance. It's about transcendence, about becoming more than what you were yesterday. But here's the paradox. Most people spend their lives suppressing this force. They confuse humility with weakness, peace with passivity, kindness with submission. And slowly, the fire that was meant to transform them begins to eat them from the inside instead. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, but without that why, the will to power turns inward, and that's when the mind begins to collapse. You stop creating, you start complaining, you stop acting, you start analyzing yourself into paralysis, and soon you're not living life, you're surviving it." So let's uncover the truth. Because if you can understand how this hidden drive operates in your mind, you can begin to control it, instead of letting it control you. In this video, we'll break Nietzsche's will to power into 4 psychological forces that shape your life, often without your consent. By the end, you'll not only understand your own behavior, but also the secret motivations of everyone around you. Key point 1, the hidden fire. What the will to power really means to understand Nietzsche, you have to let go of what you think you know about human nature. He didn't believe people were driven by survival, pleasure, or even happiness. He said the ultimate human drive is not to live, but to expand, to express strength, creativity, influence, to impose meaning on a meaningless world. That's what the will to power is. The hunger to create order out of chaos. To take what life throws at you and say, "I decide what this means." Think about it. Every time you chase a goal, you're not chasing comfort. You're chasing the feeling of being capable. Every time you argue, compete, or defend your beliefs, you're not defending truth, you're asserting your version of it. That's the will to power in action. But here's the twist Nietzsche saw that most modern psychology still avoids. This drive doesn't disappear if you suppress it. It mutates. It finds darker ways to express itself. When someone can't express their power creatively, they express it destructively. They gossip, manipulate, sabotage, or play the victim, because even weakness is a form of control. It forces others to react, to care, to adapt, and that's still power. So Nietzsche warned, if you don't direct your will to power consciously, it will direct you unconsciously, and you'll live your life trapped in patterns you don't understand. Look at your own habits, the things you crave, the arguments you start, the roles you play. Behind every one of them is the will to power trying to find expression. It's the reason a child screams for attention, the reason an artist paints, the reason a billionaire never feels done. We're all chasing expansion. We just disguise it differently. But the real question Nietzsche forces us to ask is this: are you controlling your will to power, or is it controlling you? Because when this instinct runs unchecked, it doesn't make you strong. It makes you obsessive. It makes you chase validation, domination, perfection, until you forget why you started. You begin to believe that power lies in controlling others, when in truth, it lies in mastering yourself. That's the first step, to recognize the will to power as your internal fuel, not your external weapon. Once you see that, everything changes. Because the people who appear powerful in the world, the creators, the thinkers, the ones who shape history, they're not fighting the world. They've simply learned to direct their inner fire toward creation instead of destruction. And that's where true power begins. There's a quiet tragedy happening inside most people, and they don't even notice it. It's not depression, not anxiety, not laziness. It's something deeper. It's the starvation of power. Nietzsche believed that when a human being stops striving to expand, when they stop expressing their will to power, their soul begins to rot. Not metaphorically, psychologically. Because when the will to grow, create, and transcend is denied, that energy doesn't vanish. It turns inward. It becomes bitterness. It becomes guilt. It becomes the voice that whispers, "You're not enough." You see this everywhere. In the overthinker who doubts every decision, in the kind person who lets everyone walk over them, in the perfectionist who keeps moving the finish line. These are not weaknesses. They are distorted forms of power, power that's been repressed, redirected, and turned against the self. Nietzsche called this the beginning of slave morality, a mindset where strength, confidence, and ambition are seen as dangerous, and weakness becomes a virtue. Society begins to praise the meek, the compliant, the silent, not because they're pure, but because they're predictable. And predictable people are easy to control. But Nietzsche warned, suppressing power doesn't make you good. It makes you divided. You start living two lives. One is the person you show to the world, polite, kind, agreeable. The other is the silent chaos inside, resentment, envy, frustration, all fighting for release. And when that hidden chaos grows too heavy, the mind begins to fracture. That's when people start saying things like, "I don't know who I am anymore. I feel empty. I used to be passionate, but now I just feel numb." What they're really saying is, my will to power has no direction left. Nietzsche compared this state to a lion in a cage, magnificent, strong, but pacing endlessly within invisible walls. It has claws, but no prey, a roar, but no purpose, energy, but nowhere to go. And over time, that lion forgets what it means to be wild. It begins to believe the cage is its home. That's how most people live. They mistake comfort for peace. They confuse routine with stability. But deep down, there's still that whisper, the instinct to expand, to explore, to become. And when that instinct is ignored long enough, it begins to poison everything else. Relationships start to feel draining. Work becomes meaningless. Even rest stops being restful. Because power, real power, isn't about controlling the world. It's about creating movement inside yourself. When Nietzsche said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star," he meant this: you can't shine by eliminating your chaos. You shine by giving it direction. But most people are afraid of their chaos. They suppress their anger instead of learning from it. They bury their ambition instead of shaping it. They numb their pain instead of transforming it. And in doing so, they silence the very voice that could have set them free. So how does suppression begin? It starts with social conditioning. From childhood, we're told to fit in, be nice, don't make trouble. We're taught that confidence is arrogance, that defiance is disrespect, that strong emotions are flaws. And slowly, we shrink. We start living life by permission, waiting for others to validate our existence. But Nietzsche would tell you, no one will ever give you permission to be powerful. Power isn't granted, it's claimed. Look at history's great creators, thinkers, revolutionaries. They were all misfits before they became masters, because they refused to cage their will to power. They didn't suppress their chaos. They used it as fuel. And that's the second great truth of Nietzsche's psychology. If you don't express your power consciously, it will express itself destructively. You'll manipulate when you could have created. You'll dominate when you could have inspired. You'll cling to control when you could have embraced purpose. That's why so many people end up miserable, not because they lack power, but because they've trapped it. They've buried their wildness under politeness, their potential under fear. But the soul cannot stay caged forever. When you keep denying your need to grow, something inside begins to rebel. It shows up as anger, self-sabotage, burnout, or that haunting feeling that your life is passing you by. Nietzsche called this rebellion the return of the repressed will. And when it happens, you have two choices: keep suppressing it and live as a shadow of yourself, or face it and begin to transform it. That's where the true power begins. Not in dominance, not in control, but in integration, in giving your chaos a purpose, in turning your pain into strength and your will into creation. Because suppression is death by silence, but expression, even raw, imperfect, vulnerable expression, is life returning to you. And once you learn to channel that inner fire instead of running from it, everything begins to change. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start realizing, "I already know." That's the moment Nietzsche called the awakening of the creator within. At some point, life forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. That's when Nietzsche's philosophy stops being abstract and becomes personal. Maybe it happens after betrayal. Maybe it's when you lose something that once defined you: a job, a dream, a relationship. In that moment, your old self collapses, and you're left staring at the ruins, wondering who you really are. That's where the transformation begins. Nietzsche believed that power isn't something you gain. It's something you uncover. It's been there all along, buried beneath your conditioning, your guilt, your fear of being too much. And to find it, you have to walk through your own chaos. He called this process the path of the Übermensch, the higher self, the one who dares to become more than what life has made of him. But this isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about courage. The courage to face your contradictions without flinching. Most people think transformation is about fixing themselves. Nietzsche disagreed. He believed the goal is not to remove the chaos, but to reconcile with it. To make peace with the fire inside you so that it burns for you, not against you. That's where true resilience and self-mastery are born. Think about it. When your mind feels torn between doubt and desire, fear and freedom, that's your power trying to find its voice. Instead of silencing it, Nietzsche would say, "Listen." Because every shadow you face, every dark thought you resist, is actually energy waiting to be transformed. It's like a storm inside your chest. You can hide from it, or you can learn to harness it. And when you do, that storm becomes wind in your sails. Nietzsche used the metaphor of the camel, lion, and child to describe this transformation. The camel is the obedient self, carrying the weight of duty, expectation, and shoulds. It bows under the load of what others demand. But one day, the camel grows tired of carrying everyone else's burden. It roars and becomes the lion. The lion's task is rebellion. It says, no. No to false identities. No to being controlled. No to the fear that defines most lives. But even that is not the end. After rebellion comes creation. The lion transforms into the child, pure, creative, free. A being who says yes to life again, but on his own terms. That's the highest expression of power, not domination, but creation. It's not about conquering others. It's about conquering your inner chaos and turning it into art, purpose, and meaning. You see, Nietzsche believed every human being has a creative fire inside, but most people smother it with self-doubt and shame. We're afraid of our potential because it demands that we take responsibility for it. It means stepping out of victimhood. It means realizing that no one is coming to save you, because you are the one you've been waiting for. That realization changes everything. When you stop fighting your pain and start learning from it, the same energy that once made you suffer begins to guide you. Every failure becomes a teacher. Every heartbreak becomes a doorway. Every loss becomes an initiation. That's what Nietzsche meant when he said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Your chaos isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that something powerful inside you is trying to emerge. But most people run from it. They drown it out with distractions, pleasure, validation. They mistake temporary comfort for healing. And that's why their transformation never comes. Because you can't escape what you refuse to face. And you can't transform energy you never acknowledge. The secret is to become the observer of your own chaos. To stand in the middle of your storm and ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That question changes everything, because it moves you from victim to creator. You stop reacting. You start directing. That is what Nietzsche called the highest form of strength, the ability to give meaning to your suffering. When life breaks you, you rebuild yourself consciously, not as who you were, but as who you're meant to become. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop running from your pain, it stops chasing you. Because pain doesn't want to destroy you, it wants to awaken you. That awakening is the birth of real power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that shapes reality silently. When you reach this point, you begin to see the world differently. People no longer intimidate you. Failure no longer defines you. You stop competing because you realize no one else can be you. That's when your energy becomes magnetic, because you've aligned with your own nature. Nietzsche called this alignment amor fati, the love of fate. It means saying yes to everything that has happened to you, everything that will happen, because you finally understand that nothing was wasted. Your scars become symbols. Your mistakes become wisdom. Your chaos becomes creation. And that's when life starts flowing again, not because it got easier, but because you stopped resisting who you are. What does it mean to be truly free? Most people think it means doing whatever they want, chasing desires, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure. But Nietzsche would tell you that's not freedom. That's slavery wearing a smile. Because if your emotions, fears, and impulses control your actions, then you're not free. You're just a puppet with invisible strings, pulled by whatever feels good in the moment. Nietzsche's idea of freedom was far more radical. Freedom means mastering yourself so completely that no one, not even your own mind, can manipulate you. It's when your will to power is no longer scattered or suppressed, but integrated, focused, and alive. That's the point where a person stops reacting to life and begins creating life. But to reach that point, you have to walk through a painful realization. Most of your identity was never really yours. It was borrowed from parents, teachers, culture, social media. You were taught what to want, what to fear, what success means, what happiness should look like. And so you built your life on a foundation of borrowed beliefs and called it me. Nietzsche called this illusion the herd mentality, a life where the crowd decides your worth and comfort becomes your god. But here's the truth he wanted you to see. You cannot rise above the crowd if you are still afraid of standing alone. That's why freedom begins the moment you stop seeking approval. Because every time you adjust yourself to please others, you give away a piece of your will. And over time, those pieces add up, until there's nothing left of you except a reflection of what everyone else wanted. The tragedy is that most people never notice this theft. They call it being normal. They call it being nice. But Nietzsche saw it as a kind of quiet death, the death of individuality. And so he dared to ask a dangerous question. What if the greatest act of morality is disobedience? Disobedience not in a childish way, but in a sacred way. The courage to think for yourself, to feel what you truly feel, to act from your own will instead of inherited fear. That's the beginning of self-overcoming, Nietzsche's ultimate goal. To overcome the world, you must first overcome yourself. Not by denying your darkness, but by directing it. Not by seeking comfort, but by embracing challenge. Because the will to power thrives only when it's tested. Think about the people who truly inspire you. They're never the ones who played it safe. They're the ones who faced the abyss, who stood alone, who burned down what no longer served them and built something new from the ashes. That's what Nietzsche meant when he said, "Become who you are." It's not about perfection. It's about wholeness. It's about owning both your light and your shadow, and realizing that they're not enemies, but partners. When you reach that understanding, fear loses its grip, because fear only survives in the absence of awareness. Once you see that fear is just the mind's attempt to keep you small, you begin to smile at it. You realize it's not an obstacle. It's a compass, pointing to where you need to grow. That's why Nietzsche didn't want you to run from your struggles. He wanted you to use them. He believed that suffering, when faced with courage, becomes transformation. Pain refines the soul. It teaches you what truly matters. When everything you depended on breaks, when comfort is stripped away, that's when the will to power awakens. That's when your true character reveals itself. You either collapse or evolve. And if you evolve, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing life to be easy. You stop craving validation. You start creating from a place of inner abundance, not lack. This is the ultimate form of power. When you no longer seek to control others, because you've mastered yourself. When you no longer beg for purpose, because you are purpose. When no insult, loss, or rejection can shake your peace, because it no longer depends on anything outside you. That's the life Nietzsche envisioned. Not a life without struggle, but a life where struggle becomes sacred. He once said, "The secret of happiness is, live dangerously." And he didn't mean recklessly. He meant courageously. Dare to think differently. Dare to speak your truth. Dare to build a life that is fully, unapologetically your own. Because that's where the will to power leads, not to dominance, not to ego, but to authentic creation. It turns pain into art, chaos into wisdom, and isolation into strength. And once you taste that kind of power, you never go back to being ordinary. Because ordinary is safe and safe is silent. But you were not born to be silent. You were born to roar. So if you're watching this, remember, the mind that controls you is not your enemy. It's your teacher. And the moment you stop fighting it is the moment you start mastering it. If this message resonated with you, if you're ready to rise above the noise and reclaim your will to power, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because the journey to self-mastery isn't one we take alone, it's one we ignite together. And as Nietzsche said, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Find your why, and nothing, not fear, not pain, not the world, will ever control your mind again.